My time, I just want to give you the rest of my outline and hope that it'll be a blessing to you. I'm not going to make many comments. I just want you to have your sheets filled out so you can, hoping you'll take time to go home and study the scriptures I'm going to give you. I would also like to tell you that I've been in ministry 60 years, and that's the best message I've ever heard on the whole. The most clear, and every one of you should get that tape and listen to it. Now, I believe he practices that, but I know one thing, every one of us should. Nobody is trying to justify what David did. And but there are consequences to disobedience. Whether we think we have justification for disobeying or not, if we disobey God, there are consequences. And so we need to remember that. Be seated, please, and I'm going to get right into my lesson. What I'm going to do is simply make some statements, go down through my outline, and you fill in the blanks as we are going along. We're talking about the meaning of the home, and we talked about marriage was founded by God, Genesis 2:18. We discussed that. Marriage is honorable in all, and we used Hebrews 13:4. And also, I gave 3 points under that I don't think I finished. Honorable means dear. When you talk about honorable, we find that in Acts chapter 20 and verse 34. Someone is dear to you. If you honor somebody, you honor them in a position of dearness. They're dear to you. That is, they're precious to you. That's the second thing. Honorable means precious. In 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 19, he talks about the precious blood of Christ. Precious means not only honorable, but it's also something that's rare. Precious really means rare. And that the person you honor is someone who's rare. I tell Bonnie often that she is a very special person in many ways, but she's rare because she has such deep sensitivities. She weeps over a cat that gets killed in the middle of the street. Bonnie is so sensitive. I have to tiptoe around her feelings. She gets hurt so easily, and she's very delicate, and in that regard, she's tough in many other ways, but her feelings are fragile from my perspective. And so she's very delicate, and I'm only now learning how to appreciate the value of her delicacy. She hurts real easy. And so she's precious. And that's the way a marriage should be. The partner should be precious. More than just someone to live with, they're precious. Not only when you say, we talk about honorable, honored by the fact that Christ's presence is in that marriage. Marriage is honorable in all because Christ is in it. When you have Christ involved in your marriage, that's an honorable position to be. To know that Christ, and if you're unsaved, I don't know how you can have a marriage that is anyway stable unless Christ is in it. It's got to be bedlam all the time in marriages that have no spiritual guidance at all in it. So marriage is honorable. C, capital C. Marriage is permanent. Matthew chapter 19, and someone's already talked about that, verses 1 through 9. Number one, under permanence of marriage, God's original intent was one wife for one life. Matthew 19:4. We won't take time to see it and talk about it, but that's what God's intent was. He talked about, Marty talked about the other night, that there's a beginning and there's the end to marriage. God ordained it that way, and it is that way. It is for a woman and a man, not two men or two women. Because a man and a woman, a man and a man cannot reproduce themselves. Two women cannot build a family. Two men cannot build a family. So therefore, it is not scriptural, and it is not, by definition, a marriage. Can never be a marriage. And so marriage is designed by God to be permanent. There are, however, marriage is permanent, and God hates divorce. Malachi chapter 2 and verses 15 through 16 fill in the blanks there. So marriage is designed by God to be a permanent thing until death do us part. And the Lord makes no provisions for divorce. And number 2 under C. Number D, marriage is for intimacy. That's been discussed pretty good by our pastor recently, so I'm not going to get into that, Matthew 19:5. Number E under that, marriage is dissolved by death, desertion, or fornication. Now let me explain that a little bit. There are 3 thoughts under that, and I want to give you what they are, and then I'm going to take a moment to elaborate. Number 1, marriage is dissolved by death, Romans 7:2 and 3. That's pretty obvious. That's been elucidated quite a bit. It's by sacrifice. Marriage is dissolved, rather, by desertion. You can desert a marriage, and there's room for destroying a marriage by desertion. 1 Corinthians 7:15. Paul talks about that. I don't have time to get into it. But Paul talks about if the unbelieving have a husband or wife, let them depart. Now, there's a lot of different, let me say to you, there's controversy in the ranks of Christianity about to what extent that involves. I hesitate, I don't have the time because I can't do it justice. But you need to study those scriptures out before you make a decision based on those scriptures alone. What you think about the dissolving a marriage because of desertion. I recommend you study that before you come to your conclusion or talk to the pastor about it. Also, a marriage can be dissolved for fornication. Now, I'm going to explain that to you because most of you are looking at me like a new calf staring at a gate. So, what do we mean by fornication and you can dissolve it? I'll use Joseph and Mary as my illustration. Joseph was espoused, or Mary was espoused to Joseph. Joseph wasn't espoused to Mary. Mary was espoused to Joseph. And it doesn't mean that Joseph wasn't committed to Mary, but the wife is espoused to the husband. The husband's not espoused to the wife. And espousal is the same thing we call an engagement. And you have to take the Bible to fully understand what engagement is for. What's the purpose of engagement? Why to have an engagement? Now, I learned something when I was in Korea as a missionary. It's amazing what you find out through different cultures. And then I began to realize and recognize that Joseph and Mary's experience prior to their actual marriage. They had an engagement. And their story is very plain. All of us know the story. We hear it every Christmas. Um, Joseph found out that she was with child, and he had an immediate problem. Because under the law of Moses, and I don't have time to go to all these scriptures, he could put her away if she had committed fornication under Moses' law. Now you'll find in the book of Exodus, I believe it is, in Matthew, Jesus said in Matthew, he said, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, he gave you a writing of divorcement. But here's the next phrase, you need to camp out on this one. But from the beginning, it was not so. God never intended anything to break up that marriage. But Joseph knew that under the law, he could put Mary away if she had committed fornication. Legally, he could put her aside. Keep in mind, Joseph was living under the law. So Joseph was disturbed. He knew that he and Mary had never been together. And yet she was expecting. Now, so Joseph was disturbed, deeply disturbed, as any man would be. But the reason for an engagement was for one purpose and one purpose only. To find out if that woman was going to have an affair before she got married. And the same thing happens in Korea. In Korea, when two people have an engagement, the engagement ceremony is more elaborate and more severe and more binding than the marriage itself. Because they believe what the engagement is designed for. To give that year to prove that woman. So you see, there's a reason for engagement. It means nothing in our culture. Marriage means nothing in our culture. It just means a big celebration. But in Bible days, it meant that they were betrothing themselves to each other. And the promise was, I will be true. And I'll give you a year to prove to you that I'm not going to see another man. And I'll give you a year to show that I'm not going to have an affair with another woman. Now, the sin of adultery and the sin of fornication is the same act. It is illicit sex. But one is before marriage and adultery is after marriage. But it's the same activity. You commit fornication as a single person, unmarried. You commit adultery as a married person if you have to do the same thing. Is that clear? So Joseph thought Mary had committed fornication. And Moses said, it's against the law to put your wife away for anything except fornication. So Joseph was doing what he was allowed to do under the law, and he wasn't happy about it. Joseph wasn't looking for a way to get out of that marriage. He loved Mary. But he was hurt. I mean, he went to his knees before God. He didn't know what to do. And then God dispatched an angel from heaven to solve his problem. And the angel said, don't you be afraid to take Mary as your wife. He said, there's nothing wrong with Mary. He said, that thing which is conceived in her is with the Holy Ghost. Can you imagine Joseph's joy? And can you imagine the grief that Mary went through? Living 9 months with the gossip and the talk and the struggle 2,000 years ago. Nowadays, there's nobody bothers. They get married 8 months pregnant. With the church wedding nowadays. Am I telling the truth? We have so corrupted this whole concept of marriage and purity. People walk down the aisle in Baptist churches 7 months pregnant in a white dress. They expected some preacher to marry them. I don't marry them. They ain't gonna get married by me. My daughter became pregnant before she married. I refused to marry her in the house of God. My own daughter. And I wouldn't let her wear a white dress. That's how scriptural my conviction was. I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand something. God is not playing games with this stuff. A marriage, it may be a ceremony. A marriage itself is just a ceremony. But it's more than that. Marriage is starting a family. There's a bigger purpose than just two people getting married and going to bed. We need to understand that. Or we're on the verge of destroying our civilization, our Western culture. We are at the gates of destroying Western culture. So marriages can be dissolved by death, Romans 7:23, by desertion, 1 Corinthians 7:15, and you need, if you have any question about that, you need to be with your preacher and talk to him about that. It can be destroyed by fornication, as I just talked about in the case of Mary and Joseph, and hopefully I've clarified a little of it. Marriage centers, number F, marriage centers, the center of marriage is in love, sacrifice, submission, and reverence. Now that's been covered by Brother Marty. Love, Ephesians 5, just go to chapter 5, sacrifice, submission, and reverence. And that's why I suggest you buy or get that tape. You should get every one of these tapes and listen to them. Number G, marriage is a partnership. And I'm going to say a few words about this. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. God said, I'll get you a suitable helper for you. That means you're going to share this relationship as partners. Let me give you a little personal window into. I've been married to two fine women. And I can tell you a little about how me and those two fine women have managed at least my life. I'll remind you of the woman in Proverbs 31. The Bible said, when she findeth the field, she buyeth it. There's no indication she asked her husband. A woman has a part to play in the home, in the management of that home to some extent. Now, I believe God has set up authority. I believe the man is the head or the foundation, whichever perspective you're looking at. He's either the foundation and he supports everything, or he's the head and he controls everything. I think both of those things are true. When the home needs a foundation, he's it. When it needs somebody to manage it, he's it. But the way I've done with my former wife, and Bonnie and I are operating this way now. Bonnie manages our finances. And I have nothing to do with it except I manage Bonnie. That's just only, if you do that, you ain't got no problem. She handles the checkbook. She pays every bill. I have no idea how much money we have in the bank. I don't care now. But every month, she gives an accounting. What we spent, how much we need to spend, where it's going, and we sit down, we have a talk about it. She is my financial manager. And if she ever cheats me, or lies to me, she's going to have major problems. You understand what I'm trying to say? The man is supposed to manage. When I pastored, I had a treasurer in our church. He was not elected by the people. He was appointed by me. He was usually a deacon or a part of the trustee board. And we got together, and the deacons and trustees and we sat down in our meeting, and we talked about it and prayed about who should be the treasurer. We tried to find a man that was certainly responsible, trustworthy, and so forth, and someone that knew something about bookkeeping. And then the church knew this, all part of our program, that I would appoint him. He would answer to nobody but me. And I disappointed him when I wanted to. If he didn't do a job, I replaced him. Because here's what happens. When you have a treasurer that's elected by the church, now, preacher, I'm not trying to tell you anything. I'm just telling you how I did. I'm going to make my point. If a man handles that money all the time too long, he gets thinking it's his. And pretty soon, I had my treasurer come in to me one day, and Sunday morning, he came in one day and he said, I'm not paying that bill. He was in the office. I'm not paying that bill. You bring me a receipt or something, whatever. What is it? PO? Purchase order, yeah. Bring me a PO and I'll pay it. Well, I heard him throwing his weight around, so I just said, a couple of teachers getting their Sunday school books and so forth. So after the next Monday or Tuesday, I called him up on the phone. He's a businessman, one of my best friends. And I said, I need to talk to you. When could you come up? Let's have a talk. He said, I can come up, preacher. He said, what time do you want me to come up? I said, how about this evening after supper? So he came up, and I'm sitting at my desk, and he said, what do you need, preacher? I said, I need to talk to you. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, what right do you think you have to walk in my office around these Sunday school teachers and throw your weight around about you got to go pay this bill or this bill? He's just dropped his head. He said, I don't think so. I said, it ain't your money. I said, that's not your money. I said, that's not my money. But I'm in charge of it. I said, it's God's money. I said, your job is to write the check. And if I'll take responsibility for it. I said, let me tell you something. If you leave this church and go to another church tomorrow, you can put your membership in another church, and nobody's going to hold you responsible for what happened over here. But I said, if any money goes missing in this church, as long as I'm the pastor, everybody's going to hold me responsible. I said, I'm the guy that's going to cost. If this church goes bankrupt or money's stolen or mishandled, I said, guess who gets the blame for it? I am. Because I am pastor. I said, Bud, it's not anything to you. I said, you need to understand, I am set here by God as the manager or overseer. I said, I've got to answer to God for every penny. I said, that's all it is, Bud. I said, it's not for me. I said, I'm just simply the manager. That's all I do. He said, I understand what you're doing. He said, I was dead wrong. And I am so sorry. He said, I knew it time I said it. He was one of the best men I've had. I buried him. And I loved him until the day he died and still love him. Look forward to seeing him. What I'm saying is, it's a partnership. Just like a church is a partnership to some extent. But God appoints the authorities. God appointed the authority in the home. The husband is the appointed authority, and a wife can serve in whatever capacity her husband appoints for her to serve. If your wife is better at handling money than you do, you'd be smart to let her handle If she can manage money better than you do, you'd be foolish not to let her have it. That may be read some if you can't get your books balanced. You ain't got the brain for it. So it's a partnership. We need to learn that our homes, our wives are not our enemies. And your husband's not your enemy, not if he loves you. He's your partner. And if he knows how to handle the money, let him handle it if you want to try to hold a check. I don't care to write a check. I just want somebody else to write it, and I enjoy spending it. Marriage is a partnership. Number 8, marriage is to prevent fornication. You'll find that over in Romans chapter 7, when I said that marriage is dissolved by death, desertion, or fornication. Now, here I'm saying marriage is to prevent fornication. You need to study that passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and understand where Paul is coming from. So, some single people, they think fornication is all right. I'm telling you, it is not all right. It is not all right. And so I hope you'll get a hold of that, guys and girls. So, number I, marriage is to produce a godly seed. I wish I had time to cover Malachi chapter 2, verse 14 through 15. And Psalms 127, verses 3 through 5. But it's to produce a godly seed. If you're married or going to get married, understand this. God expects you to reproduce. Part of the reason for marriage is to reproduce, to procreate. That's part of it. That's not the only reason we get married, but that's a major part of it. Marriage is for enjoyment. Proverbs 5:18 and Ecclesiastes 9:9. We have a right to enjoy our marriage. Preacher talked about that a little bit, and so did Brother Martin. So we're not going to get into that. But these verses also, you need to look at about joy. He said, enjoy your wife in the times of your youth. You want to have a good time with your wife. If you want to chase her around the bedroom, that's your problem. But that's, but I'm saying that you don't need to God don't expect you to marry somebody you don't like. So, I mean, have a good time. Do things with your wife and enjoy it. Bonnie and I are planning a trip somewhere, sometime. We talk about it all the time. Can I take, what time am I supposed to get through? 20 after? Let's talk about the husband in the marriage. This would be lesson 2. I'll go through this real quickly. The husband in the marriage, he is to find the wife, Proverbs 18, verse 22. To find the wife. Number 1 under that, he is the initiator, she is the responder. Ladies, girls, be careful about chasing men. Let the man chase you. The man don't want to be chased because he has thoughts about what kind of woman you are. Understand this, girls. Let me be plain with you. Understand this. When you throw yourself at a boy, he probably wouldn't marry you in a lifetime. He don't want you to chase him down. That's not the kind of girl he wants as his wife. If you think you got to chase, don't believe these girls you see on TV. If they were all that happy, they wouldn't take dope. They wouldn't be out there doing what they're doing. So you need to understand you don't need to get your lifestyle from Hollywood and Dollywood and Hollywood and all that stuff. He is to be the initiator. She is to be the responder. He takes the lead. The girl responds to that leadership. and look for leadership if you're dating. I don't like the word dating. I like the word courting better. My first wife and I, we never dated. I went to her house and we courted in her living room. We were never alone until the night we got married. We never were alone until the night we got married. Number B, under the husband in the marriage, he is to leave his parents and to cleave to his wife. Genesis 2:23-24. Now, somebody said a while ago, I think it was Marty, either last night or today, leave and cleave. Look up the word cleave and to mean more to you. Leaving parents is proof of dependency. If that guy you're thinking about married, if he doesn't have the wherewithal to leave his parents, understand this, he's depending on his parents. And he ain't ready for you. You're going to marry a guy you're going to have to support. So if he's not dependent, if he's still dependent on his parents, you don't need that guy. Okay? So when he's ready to get up and leave his parents, see, we prepare our kids to leave us. We prepare our wives to stay with us. That's the difference. That's why we respect them and love on them and do what we do for them, because I don't want my wife to leave me. I want her to be dependent on me. I want to make her so dependent on me she can't get along without me. Because I don't think I can get along without her. But I don't want you to stay all the time. If you're my child, I want you out of here when you mature. Keep in mind, too, there is a point at which your children ain't your children no more. Get a hold of this, parents. An 18-year-old is not a child. So quit treating him like one. There's such a thing as an age of accountability. Are you listening to me? When are you going to let that kid grow up? I didn't ask my mom and dad when I could get married or who I could marry. I was 19 years old. I'd already fought a war. Now I got to go ask my daddy, can I get married? Good Lord. When I get old enough to make some of my own choices, you've got to study this first. Train up a child in the way he should go. What does that word train mean? Some people interpret that to mean it's all about religion. It ain't. Study the word train. Train up a child in the way he should go. It has to do with his religious bent and all that. But it also has to do, training don't mean just spiritual. It means understand him enough to know where his talents are and his gifts are. So that you can, if you go back and remember that in those days there was no public schools and everybody were trained as apprenticed in a profession. Philippians 4. This I say, that as long as he is a child, the child, as long as he is a child, the heir, as long as he is a child, differs nothing from a servant as long as he's a child. Am I right? Philippians 4? Colossians 4. Somebody help me here. I think Galatians 4. Galatians 4. This I say, that the heir, this is it, that the heir, the one who's going to inherit the policy, that the heir, as long as he is a child, I think I'm right, differeth nothing from a servant, though he is Lord over all, but is under tutors and governors, until the time appointed of the Father. So as long as you act like a child, your daddy has the right to treat you like a servant. And a child, you don't ask him what kind of toothpaste you shove the toothpaste tooth and this is the toothpaste you use. These are the shoes you wear. You treat him just like a servant. And how do you treat a servant? You give him just enough money to pay the bill. You tell him where to go, how to get there, and when to come back. How do you treat a child? Same way. You tell him what to brush his teeth, when to brush them, what clothes to wear, when to wear them, when to bring them back. You tell him where to go, when to come back. That's what the Bible says. You treat him just like a servant. Until he's old enough, Paul said, when I was a child, I thought as a child. I spake as a child. I understood as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. 1 Corinthians 13. So, when do we let them become a man? When they act like a man. When they become responsible. You don't need to hang on to him and he's 35 years old and say, that's my son. No, he's your son, but he ain't your child. He's a grown man. And you're not responsible for what he does after he becomes a grown man. So quit feeling guilty about that child that disappoints you once he's gone. Unless you didn't bring him up, as Paul warns us, in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But if you brought him up in the nurture and admonition of this book, God don't hold you responsible for what he does after he reaches the age of accountability. It's on him. Leaving parents is proof of independence. Number 2, cleaving to the wife is proof of priority. A man who cleaves to his wife, he's showing where his priorities are. Number C, he's to cheer up his wife. I got a minute. He's to cheer up his wife. Deuteronomy 24 and verse 5. Number 1 under that, he is to take care and please his wife. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 33. Number 2, how to become a happy couple or a happy marriage. How to have a happy marriage. Psalms 140 and verse 8. I delight to do thy will, O God. Psalms 128 and verse 1. Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. Psalms 133 and verse 1. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for the brethren to dwell together in unity. Proverbs 29:18. For there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Proverbs 16:20. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. You can have a happy marriage. You can have a pleasant marriage, and your wife don't have to be bitter all the time if you practice some of these things. Number D, he is to render due benevolence to his wife. 1 Corinthians 7, 3 through 5. Number E, he is to spiritually affect his wife. Affect his wife. He's to have an effect on his wife spiritually. In other words, he's to be the spiritual leader in his home. 1 Corinthians 7, 14 through 16. Number F, he is head of the home. 1 Corinthians 11, 33. He is to kindly rule over her. We've talked about that. Others have talked about that. Now, don't get too heavy on that idea of ruling. It really means to lead with love and kindness. Women are more delicate. And so, they're more delicate, so respect the fact that she is more tender and more delicate. Paul said, giving honor unto the wife as a weaker vessel. That don't mean mentally. She is physically weaker. I have no respect for anybody that will abuse his wife or any girl for that matter, any woman. It's tragic. It's unbelievable. He is to render due benevolence. Number E, he is to spiritually affect his wife. He is to be the head of the home. 1 Corinthians 11:33. He is to kindly rule over her. Number G, he is to protect and provide for her. Ephesians 5:23. And number 1 under that, the savor of the wife. He is to nourish the wife. He is to cherish the wife. He is to be not bitter toward her. H, Colossians 3:18 and 19. He is to honor her. We talked about that a little bit before. 1 Peter 3:7. He is to have eyes only toward her. Ezekiel 24:16. Some of these verses are interesting. Number K, he is to instruct her. 1 Corinthians 14:34 through 33. You know, one of the things I can say to this, a woman must not be angry when her husband tries to instruct her. I don't want to be married to a woman who is a preacher. I'd like my wife to think that I might have something, that I might know something I could teach her. I wouldn't want to be married to a woman so she knew everything. I want to have that role. I'd like to think I have something that I can give away. If you don't have that, you probably ought not to get married. He is to instruct her, 1 Corinthians 14. L, he is to understand the woman's curse. Genesis 3:16. She'll bear children in sorrow, in pain. Understand that. And women, man didn't put that curse on you. Eve did. So that's all I've got. I've got a lot more, but I'll have time. My time's gone. The thing is, you know, a lot of it, is if you just get in your Bible and read that, it's amazing how much you can find out if you just get in your Bible. You know, we need to get to where we believe what the Bible says is true. We don't need Hollywood and all these characters out here and running loose and reckless with the truth. We don't need to get our information from that. Like somebody said a while ago, well, I've been married 7 times, so I'm authority on it. Why would I want to take advice? Why would I want to take advice on sobriety from a guy that's been an alcoholic to 10 years? Or why would I want to take a class on marriage from a guy that's been married 3 times? What I'm saying is, don't go to the Philistines. There's a message here. Israelites got to the place where they had to go to the Philistines to sharpen their swords. During the war between Israel and their enemies, the Philistines disarmed the Jews. They took their plowshares, things they plowed with, and Israel would take those things they plowed with and they'd turn them into swords. So what the Philistines said, they took all the smiths, the people that could sharpen swords and make swords. Philistines did away with all those people, and Israel had to go to the Philistines to get their weapons of war sharpened. They just made it impossible for them to fight. Satan's going to disarm you. He got one way to do it. This sword's always sharp. Satan cannot dull this. Only you can do that. It's always sharp. But it's no good if you can cheat. You got to pull it out and use it. It's solve your problem.